So, yeah, we were talking about songwriting and the entire process actually. Because did you find yourself listening to certain music or set of music or songs that sort of keep you in a place that you wanted to be? Or did you try to avoid that altogether?
Mm, yeah, no, the rules are more internal than external, I think. You know, I find when I'm writing, I can't listen to a lot of music because the songs I'm writing are in my head too much. So I'm more consumed by the internal process. But there would be certain things I'm like, it's that kind of song, I should really push that aspect in the song. And so in the process, there's these moments of, can I do that? Have I done that? Will I do it? I should do it because it's uncomfortable. It's a new place. So, you know, I mentioned Blue Hotel has that thing. I really like the chord structure in that. And there's a lot of melodic possibilities in that because of how those shifts from major to minor, where it could have easily just went minor, minor. The way the chords, you know, shift around a lot. I really enjoy that. Likewise, you know, when you look at If the Moon, I think there's a lot of ways it could not work. So it's a struggle to make it work when you're doing those strange shifts of key changes, but make them smooth, you know. But I think on this there was a lot of reference to things I'd heard in the past, things I grew up with. Going, I really like that. Why haven't I done something like that? Maybe, I mean, it all comes down to the Beatles' White Album, because you just listen to that and you're like, you can do whatever you want, even if you're not a Beatle. But maybe that's the big lesson here: is they're the Beatles because they do it. It's not they do it because they're Beatles, right?
Right.
They're just going, anyone can do this. Do any array of songs together as long as you get behind them.
Right.
So, you know, If the Moon is a very strange shift. When I played that first, I was like, what's going on there? Just, you know, B minor to an F. There's almost no melody in between there that you could pin on it. And somehow it maintains this aura of easiness, and it sounds a lot simpler than it is, you know. And just throw a theremin in there casually just to, you know, keep it simple. So the songwriting was a lot of those points of reference and thinking, okay, I haven't done that and I need to explore the idea behind that. And that really opens up avenues. And I think the other song that sticks out for me is when you get actually all the songs have this thing where I'm thinking, have I explored that avenue before? How can I do it? You know, is it something that I'm going to be able to sing again and again? They're probably the bigger rules, rather than I want it to sound like Roxy music or I want it to sound like 70s dance music. Those rules don't work so well for me. It's more like I need limitations. But a big thing was, okay, these songs, and probably the only one I would have trouble, maybe not even trouble, but reservation about playing live is the last song, which is Sing Me Home.
Sure.
And only because I really want to capture that arrangement live, and that's going to take about 15 musicians, I think, to really do it, you know.
Yeah, for sure.
So, in general, is that idea of exploring and pushing, and maybe hanging them back on that concept of the road and the highway and the overall story arc. Right. Thinking, what kind of song do I need now? I've got this kind of song, you know, I've got a driving one, I've got a more poetic exploration of relationship in Blue Hotel, and I go, what comes next? What happens then in the story? What needs to happen in terms of an album, in terms of, do we want to build them up more, drop them down? And when you see that 10 songs are laid out in a certain way, what story are they telling? And is it an arc that's something that you will want to press repeat on? You know, especially now when people listen less and less to albums. Can I make people listen to an album? Mm-hmm. It's quite a challenge. Right. So I'm hoping, you know, that portion of an audience will get behind that idea of the album, and when they get to Sing Me Home, they'll want to hear FM radio again and go back down that same highway. So there's a lot of those considerations in terms of the songwriting and the songs that went into it. but that's also song selection, you know, because of narrowing it down from so many songs. So the songwriting process was almost exterior to that, and then I was choosing them because I already had the songs.
Well,
You know.
Prince once mentioned that he only ever listened to his own music and Joni Mitchell's.
Yeah.
And so the White Album like frees you up stylistically, but do you find yourself like that? Is there some core artist or album that sort of that you draw from all the time, or do you literally when you're not right like just listen to yourself, or
Yeah,
or how do you keep
yeah.
in that space?
The one of the big keys of songwriting is to not get in the way for me. So I'm trying not to think about it.
Mhm.
I try to write and then edit after the fact,
Sure.
and try and get as much of it down as possible. So that's the process in itself. But as far as the artists behind that, I mean, I think because I heard the Beatles at such a young age, I can't
Sure.
escape that.
Sure.
And there's something, I mean, but even exterior of,
Powerful.
yeah, I mean, there is that too. You know, exterior to myself, I don't think if you're a songwriter, you can escape them, and you shouldn't.
More, yeah.
It's a weird thing to avoid. It would be some perverse stubbornness that wouldn't, I don't know if it would benefit you in any way. The band are another one. The band are massive because I think they serve the song so well. They're almost like a band full of Ringos, which is weird.
Sure.
They're like egoless compared to the Beatles. You know, the Beatles very much had that.
Robbie Robertson.
But even Robbie is still, he's still not. It's not Robbie Robertson and the band. He's the band. I
Yeah.
mean, the name says it all.
Right.
These are the guys
sure.
have disappeared into this
Sure.
entity called the band, and that's
Yeah.
impressive. Whereas the Beatles were defined as 4 people.
Sure.
But the band are, unless you know them very well, most people don't know who they are. You know.
But I wonder if that's something that, in retrospect, got thrown on the Beatles. Because I have a feeling, as egoed as they were, as a band inside, they were probably pretty tightly
For sure.
put together.
yeah.
It's only that it kind of got asunder
Yeah, I think
through
the.
that process.
Oh well, I think that was time they drifted apart, as anyone should
absolutely.
naturally. They're spending so much time together. They lived lifetimes together
Oh, yeah.
in no years.
Yeah.
But the branding of the Beatles was those 4 faces.
Right.
And then sooner or later, people are going to pick their favorite, which means they have a least favorite, which means they have a second and a third, and then, you know, and they also had the jockeying for position for the
Sure.
single, which.
But you don't do that in the band.
No.
Right.
See what I mean?
Yeah.
It's the band are a band
Right.
entity, you know.
Like, who's your favorite band member? You're not going to really talk
Okay,
about
leave
that.
on. But anyway, no. But then I said, well, then I feel bad for Gareth. I can't.
Yeah.
But then what about Richard? Come on, you can't. What a voice.
Yeah.
So you can't. There's very little way between the band to get in there. You know, there's solid unit.
And they were a great backing band.
But again, because they're a solid unit, there's no ego.
Right,
I mean, comparatively, I mean, of course, anyone on stage has this weird ego interplay, you know. But definitely the Beatles and the band. In terms of albums, weirdly, I was thinking about it when we asked about. Like, I love Grace by Jeff Buckley, but then I think it's an unfair story arc. It's a weird one, because sometimes you're so in the mood for like 2/3 of it, but then you're like, you know, you're in that last goodbye vibe, and you're into, you know, eternal life, and then you hear Corpus Christi Carol, and you're kind of like, oh, not what I needed right now.
Right.
I want more of that.
Right.
And you know, it's like he condensed too much of himself. I think he probably had 5 amazing albums he could have come out of that one session, you know, of completely diverse things.
Right.
And that's something that plays on my mind, you know, that the album arc is very uneven. Amazing. It's amazing. I mean, you can't fault the sounds, everything, but just that one thing about the album. And the flip side, the Verve, I love that. I mean, everyone knows that the Verve album.
Urban Hymns.
Exactly, yeah. And the prior albums are these epic things, but this went a bit longer, and I always think of that. I think the problem with Urban Hymns, I love it, but I find I don't want to exist in that. I want to go back and repeat before I want to continue to the end. It's just a bit too long. You know, it's not quite a double album, it's got this length.
Right.
And then I think of the Beatles, and I'm like, well, how long is their double album? That's probably shorter than the Verve single album.
That's true.
And so all these concerns are, you know, play around in my mind when I'm putting together an album. You know, if you're going to go super long, do you think you're better than the Beatles? Do you? You know,
Exactly.
I think it still plays on me that
Yeah.
kind of pop aesthetic that, despite not, I don't think I write pop music. It's still there in me because I grew up with the Beatles, who were the poppiest of pop in the day.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and so all these things play into the construction of the album as an entity outside of the music as well. How I perceive it and how hopefully the perception is passed forward.